Welcome to the Chassidic approach to joy. We are now on chapter 12. This is the last chapter. And I think in one sense, this is actually one of the most intriguing ones. We've heard talk about fake it till you make it and things like that in the world of business. And I think there's an interesting insight into the Chassidic aspect of this now, which is that idea of tracht gut wird sein gut. Think good and it will be good. And how does that actually play itself out? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So the positive potential of simcha, of joy, of gladness, is highlighted by the Maggid of Mizrich when he interprets the verse from Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our fathers. That it's the second piece that says, "Dalama lamayla mimoch," that know what is above you, and it goes on then to teach you that you should know what's above you. What is that? There's an eye that sees and an ear that hears, and everything is recorded. Meaning that you're not going to get away with anything. You are being watched, right? And not like Big Brother, where it's if they got all the attachments available for it, but rather in a much deeper way that God is always watching. And I think it's an important part of the lessons that are missing in our education systems. Because there aren't enough policemen in the country, and there aren't enough teachers in the country to be able to be watching at all times what young people are doing to police, so to speak, the situation. Rather, we need to know that there's a God, and everything we're doing is being watched and heard and recorded, meaning that you will be held accountable. And so that's the basic meaning. That's the basic meaning of their know what is above you, right? But Chassidus goes to look a little bit deeper into the words, because you could also look at the words dama lamayla, know what is above, mimach, from you, or is based on you, it comes from you, meaning that everything that we do actually has a tremendous impact on the universe. So let's delve into that a little bit more, right? It's not just, that if there's a happy-go-lucky person in the room, it kind of lightens up the party, and everyone gets a little bit happier when that happens. I was talking with someone earlier this week at the Civil Air Patrol New York Wing Conference, and I forget exactly how it came up, but two of us were having a good time, and someone else was kind of standing in on it, and he said that it reminded him of Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner, two Jewish guys going at it.
You should have been very complimented.
And he said, and we talked about the 2,000-year-old man routine that they used to do. And that routine actually it began at a party. It literally, it was a Hollywood party, and people were there, and Carl Reiner turned to Mel Brooks and he said something like, "And I understand that you're 2,000 years old. Let's talk about that." And they went off on it. Totally improv, just they went and did their own kind of thing. So I have no idea how that has to relate to this, except the fact that two happy guys in a room can change the whole party, right? That's the bottom line, is that we do create the environment that we're in, right? So we see that in a physical sense, in a room that you're in, and there's the opposite is also true, right? You've walked into a room sometimes, and it's like the atmosphere is thick enough you could cut it with a knife. There's a whole trepidation in the room. So it can go both ways. But yes, we do create the environment that we're in. So what the Zohar is actually telling us is that it's more than just that. It's more than just you create the environment, but rather that the spiritual world is directly related to the physical world. Well, that makes sense. If God created the universe, and then therefore everything is a reflection of God, and we see in the Bereshit that God created mankind in His image, right? So that means we're automatically a reflection of God. Just as we can see, God can see, but not with fleshy eyes. It's a whole different level of seeing. But we talk, we reveal what we're thinking, and so in the same lens, revelation. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And His speech reveals things, right? So we know that part of it. But what the Zohar is talking about here is actually a reflective piece. Is that the way we behave, the way we serve God, actually reflects back up to God. So let's take that out of in a different environment for a second, right? I can remember as a child, but I can also reverse that and remember as my kids, right? Kids coming home from school, and there's an environment in the home. Is that environment going to be a warm, welcoming, glad to have you, or is it a chaotic environment that a kid comes home to and like, oh wow, now thoroughly overwhelmed, right? So what is the environment that we're creating? But you can be having a really tough day, and one of the kids comes home and runs with a big smile and a big hug, and it changes your day. It just changes it, right? I remember, I think it was a poet, Victor, can't remember his last name now, but he said, there is nothing in the world that cannot be fixed by a lively, "Hi, Dad." So again, there's a reflective thing. That which we reflect to the kids comes back to us. That's what the kids are doing comes to us. We reflect back to them. And you can see that even with an infant, right? A baby gets excited when the person is smiling at them, and they smile back, which makes you even more happy. And it goes back and forth. That's that creating of that reflective environment. The same thing with God, that the way we work with God it's reflective back and forth, right? And it's similar to, if we think about it, our own neshama and our body, our physical, our godly soul within us, and the body itself, right? If we're happy, we're more energetic. If we're in pain or agony, you can see it. I teach a Stop the Bleed class at synagogues that are interested. And one of the things we talk about is that if you put on a tourniquet, you're supposed to put a T on the forehead. Why in the forehead? The intention is that when they get to the medical center, that whoever's dealing with them will immediately see the T and will know that there's a tourniquet here. Go find it, right? But why here? Why on the forehead? Because every medical person, the very first part of their assessment of a patient is looking at the eyes. Because when you see the eyes, you can see right into their whole being. You can see the pain in their eye, you can see the agony, you can see the distress, all that stuff you can see, or you can see that they're calm and they're managing.
Or their pupils are dilated.
Or their pupils.
Yeah.
But that's the first thing is we put the T for a tourniquet on the forehead, because that's what we're looking at first is the eyes. And the eyes reveal the soul. So the soul within us is pure and holy, but it is affected by what we say and do and think, and we are impacted by it as well. So the same thing in our relationship with God is that If we reflect joy and happiness back to God, it changes what's going on in the world. And if we come back to God with anger and stress, then that also impacts the world. So when we go back to the same Mishnah, and this Mishnah is talking about Dala Mala, know what is above, Imach is from you. Part of that is saying everything is, there's an eye that sees and the ear that hears, and everything is being recorded. Know that you're being watched, but it also means that God is also responding to our thought, speech, and actions as well. And furthermore, we talk about that the idea that the soul and the body, they function as one entity. And so as long as a person is alive, his body and soul share the same identity. The body expresses what's happening within the person. We're also going to see that in the spiritual world, the same thing. So we just were studying the Parshas Noach, the second parsha of the Torah. And in Parshas Noach, it talks about the whole flood, the whole situation of the flood, right? The world had gotten so bad that was the response. And when God saw the destruction, he also decided that from here on, it's going to be a world that begins with mercy, and that every time we might deserve destruction, God would send a keshet, a rainbow across the sky to say, we have a covenant. We have a covenant. I'm not going to destroy the world again because of man's behavior. Typically, most of us will look at a rainbow, and it's pretty and it's beautiful and it's awe-inspiring. It should also inspire or arouse us to think about our behaviors, because that was what the original sign was about. At the same time, when there's a gentle rain, something to think about. When there's a gentle rain, that's a sign of blessings. The Baal Shem Tov talks about when you see water, you should say that the water is a sign of blessings, right? A gentle rain is God blessing the world with kindness and gentleness, and that's a beautiful thing, and something we should be able to appreciate. So, bottom line is that we reflect back to God. God reflects back to us. It's this two-way relationship that's going on, and the more that we are able to turn on the joy, right, then the more that will be the response we're getting back. So when we say that mankind was created in the image of God, God does not possess eyes. He possesses a means of perception. So essentially, what we're talking about is this cycle of us reflecting God, God reflecting us, us reflecting God, God reflecting us. It's this cyclical relationship, and I want to. It doesn't say it in the chapter, but I want to make that reference to the same thing as a couple. A married couple are considered as one entity, one being, and we see this in a relationship as well, right? What comes around goes around. If you're sharing goodness and kindness, that's exactly what comes back to you. It's also in the world at large, but how much more so even with a family relationship or a spousal relationship. But it's that cyclical piece. So how do we then, we talked about the beginning, we talked about how do we create, how do we said the idea of tak v'zayin good, think good and it will be good. How do we create that? So that's us creating it. It's not a cute phrase. It's actually very much something we can implement. If we lead our life joyfully and we raise the joy around us and the happiness around us, it comes back to us. if we raise the joy and excitement even up to the heavens, then it comes back to us. God responds to us. So we actually can change things. And one of the things that we're seeing in the world today is the unity of the Jewish people in the face of trauma, and the strength it gives back to each other as we go through this throughout the world. But what we may not be attuned to is that unity also goes up to God, and he can respond in kind. Those of us that are parents know that one of the most precious things that parents can ever see is their kids taking care of each other. It's just a very special, warm feeling. I remember that when my oldest son is in North Dakota, for a while we had also some kids that lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And that's a good 4-hour drive. But up there, everything's a long drive. So they would go visit each other like once a month, as if, hey, it's not far. Whereas I know people in Chicago that don't even walk to Skokie because it's across the river, man. So that relationship, when God sees that we get along with each other and we care about each other, we take care of each other, that creates a response on his end as well to bring out joy and happiness and goodness. So when we say good things, positive influences are generated in a spiritual realm. In our thoughts, speech, and action, those things actually create a response from God. In the Parsha we were talking about, this week's Parsha, we talk about Abraham, the first Jew. And one of the things that God gives to him is the power of blessings, that the world will be blessed through you. What does that mean? That means that when we bless each other, when we wish each other good tidings, it brings about a response to bring that out from God. The God goes to fulfill those things. And so when we say that if someone is sick and you go to visit them, the Talmud says it takes away a percentage of their illness is taken away by someone who cares enough to visit. Well, if we think about it in this way, it's not just that you make them happy and happiness helps to cure them, but the fact that you care makes God also want to care. And so again, that brings out more of the healing. So God is responding to us. So trach gut wird sein gut. If we'll think good things, it does bring out good things, and not just from those around us and the environments around us, but even from God. We studied a book, Shara B'Tochen, in another series of classes that we did for a while. Shara B'Tochen is the gate of trust. One of the things that I found was very interesting was that how do I trust that God will bless me with good things when I know that I'm not deserving? I mean, I may put up a good show for you guys, but I know. And so how can I expect and trust that God will do good for me when I know I don't deserve it? Jacob, our father, when he comes back from Lavan, and he has a wrestling with the angel, and he's got to go face Esau. One he says, "Katanti mikol chasadim." God, you've been so kind to me. I'm afraid I've used up all my credits. I mean, I ran away from home with nothing but my stick, and I came back with 4 wives and all these kids and all this flock of cattle, and all. I'm hugely wealthy. I'm afraid going forward that I've used up all my credits because you've been so good and kind to me. You've given me all these goodness, right? But But that humility brings out the desire from God to want to do even more, right? So when we were learning Shara B'Tachan, the gate of trust, one of the things it said there was having trust. It's not a simple matter. It doesn't come automatically. It's something you have to develop, you have to work on. And so that God should bless us, it's sufficient the fact that we trust him to do so, even if we don't necessarily deserve. Mm-hmm. We trust him to do so. Now, I get that as a dad, because I know that kids and grandkids can do some really stupid things. Truth be known, I do that myself too, right? And yet, I still want to do good for them. I still want to bless them. I still want to give them things, even when they don't deserve, even when they've done stupid things, because of our relationship. They trust me. And therefore, I want to do good, even when it's not deserved. And that's what bitachon comes out to as well, is that the fact that we have bitachon, that God is going to take care of us, brings out the good from God as well. So if I'm a worrywart, if I'm always distressed about things, well, in a sense, that can create the response of, oh, you don't trust me to deliver good just because you don't deserve it? Get over yourself. I want to bless you. I want to give you. Right? So we want to develop that trust and the focus on trusting that it will be good, and then God responds in kind even faster. So our active trust and our active joy actually brings down the blessings. It creates that desire from God to want to shower us with positive and good things. And so we say that simcha paratz together. Simcha, joy, it breaks all boundaries. And that's that same idea, is that if we not only trust in God, but we trust in God so much that it's palpable. You can see it in our face, you can see it in our voice, and you know that we know it's good. It's going to be good. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be perfect. And that trust in and of itself brings out the goodness and breaks through whatever barriers there may have been to the blessings. That joy breaks through all of that. And again, it's not always easy. Being joyful in challenging situations is not easy, but by being joyful, we are truly demonstrating our trust in God and our absolute faith that he wants to give us beautiful, good, wonderful, revealed good things. And so the more we radiate the joy and the simcha, the more God is able to turn and respond with open and revealed blessings as well. The more we are unified and together, the more we bring out the blessings. The more we take care of each other with acts of goodness and kindness, the more God responds with acts of goodness and kindness. So it's, again, this reciprocal piece. We're a part of God. God is a part of us. The more we bring out the joy and trust and the kindness, the more he wants to do the same. So as we wrap up our class, our 12-chapter series on the Chassidic approach to joy, the Chassidic approach to joy, it comes down to trusting God wants to bless us with good things. That trust being so solid that we truly believe it will be good, maybe even trust that it is actually good, even when it's not palpable good. Reminded of the story of the Chassidic saying that talks about the child who who kisses the stick he gets punished with. Because it's used by his father who loves him and is only helping him to be a better person. But most of us can't kiss that stick. We want to curse it, right? But if we have the appreciation, the understanding deep enough, then we can get it. There's a story about the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe when he was 10 years old, living in Russia, and his father was going out of town, and he wanted to go. He was absolutely excited. He wanted to go with his dad. And his teacher said he shouldn't miss his studies. Going out of town for a week with his dad, he'll miss a lot of his studies, and it's not appropriate. And his dad said, yeah, he shouldn't go. So he's screaming and crying and upset and crying, and then he stops. And now his mother is worried because it's quite normal for a 10-year-old to be crying that his daddy's going out of town and he doesn't get to go. That's quite normal. But why did you stop? And he said, my father loves me. My teacher loves me. Obviously, they want the best for me. So obviously, I shouldn't be going. So what am I crying for? We need to be able to do the same in our relationship with God, is to understand that everything we have, everything we get is a blessing from God. It's a wonderful, good thing. And the more we can rejoice in what we are blessed with, even when it's hidden, even when it comes from a staff, a rod, if we can acknowledge and appreciate from where it's coming and understand that God only wants the best for us, then at that point we can appreciate it and rejoice even in having it. And when God sees our joy and understanding of the goodness that's coming our way, revealed or not as good, but we appreciate it because it's coming from him, then there's no reason anymore to have that coming in a negative way. It can come in a positive way as well. And so we go back to that idea of, we talked about this in the very, very first class. The Chassidim used to be called the Freilich, the happy ones. They're always happy. What are you always happy about, right? But it comes down to, if we understand that everything comes from God and God is good, hence everything is good, even if it doesn't feel like it is, it is. And if we can appreciate that and accept that, then what's not to dance about? What's not to sing about every day? And that is the Chassidic approach to joy. So I'd love to get your thoughts and feedback from the whole class, the whole 12 chapters. What are you walking away with?
It's a nice concept, but sometimes it's very hard to do.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I haven't felt too joyful the last 3 weeks being Jewish.
No.
Yeah.
I felt a lot of rage, actually.
And you know what? And we talked about this in class before as well. The fact that I have to be joyous in what comes to me does not deny the emotions of pain and sorrow and even rage. Those are appropriate because we're human beings. But we also have to, at the same time, be able to acknowledge and accept that bad things do happen, and we have to respond to those things while still knowing that somehow there's greatness and goodness in some level, somewhere on a higher plane.
Tell me, does the evil that man does come from God?
Yes.
And if it comes from God, it is good,
Right.
by definition.
Right.
So then the evil that man does is good.
So we have free choice on how we behave. And if we behave contrary to God's instructions, then their punishment is deserved. Free choice is not taken away. But at the same time, the example we used in class earlier was if the dog bites us, the dog has to be dealt with. It has to be punished or it has to be put down because it's a danger. But that doesn't detract from me understanding that comes from God, because the dog couldn't bite if God wasn't going to let him to. The same is true with a person. A person has a choice to do the good things and do kind things and the right things. If they choose not to, there will be consequences. But at the same time, we also have to understand that it couldn't happen if God did not permit it. Somehow, there's goodness there. But as we spoke about before, we have to be careful. Because if we accept evil as good, we lose our humanity.
I'm afraid that's what we're seeing.
Yes, indeed. We are.
So before we get into the political side,
I'm not getting into the
It's-
I got it.
political
I
side.
got it.
It's not critical at all.
I got it. But I want to also stay focused on, because we could easily go there, and I want to stay focused for the recording purposes on the whole series of the class and what we talk away from it, what we take away from it.
I would think that there are situations that are put there that you should not celebrate. And there are examples for you to learn from. So rather than rejoicing in it, you would think you would take the perspective of saying, okay, what caused this? Is there something that can be done to not prevent it going forward, so it would be repeated? Because if we continue to rejoice in something going bad, and maybe it's a repercussion for something that we have done, because we know Hashem rewards you for what you do, but he also punishes you for what you don't do correctly. So rather than rejoice in being punished for something you don't do correctly, I would think that you would want to turn it around and say, okay, this isn't something to rejoice. This is something to take apart, understand, and change our actions accordingly.
And both of those are true. We have to be able to rejoice that God is being so clear to us that we need to be able to change our ways. There was a biblical disease years ago called teras. It has been erroneously translated as leprosy, but teras was a skin disease. Actually, it also came on your clothes and it came on your house. But it was a spiritual disease that was physically revealed on the skin. And you would go to a Kohen and you would say, "Hey, is this teras?" And he would mark it, and you come back a week later and see if it's grown. There was a whole process. It was a revelation from God of an opportunity to do teshuvah for more difficult areas, particularly, for example, lashon hara and motzi shem ra. Saying bad things about people, true or not, saying bad things about people is wrong. You know, if I'm asking you about someone as a business partner, you do have to tell me he's dishonest, yes. But if I'm not asking about that, there's no excuse to say anything bad about another person. If it's not about business or interpersonal business, there's no reason to say anything negative about anybody. And doing so would bring on saras. And saras would be that divine sign on your skin. Hey, buddy, you need to get your act together. You need to straighten up. It may even include isolation. If it was spreading and you're not getting better, isolation from the community, giving you the opportunity to do internal introspection and think about it. So yes, it is absolutely a heads up that things that are painful and difficult are heads up for us to review our behaviors, our thoughts, speech, and action, to see what we can do to improve them. But at the same time, I can remember many times of someone, that drops a plate, or there's a car accident, and thank God everyone gets away alive, but the car is totaled, and the Jewish response is Ozayna Kapara. It should be a sacrifice instead of us. People walk away from a car accident, thank God nobody was seriously hurt.
That's only property.
It's only property. And whatever we had to lose, because, so yes, like David said, we want to think back and say, hey, well, what have I been doing that I could potentially be deserving of a punishment? And thank God the punishment came out through the car and not something else. It came out on my property. In fact, the Talmud talks about the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, was God's way of diverting his anger. Better it should be on the building and not my people. So yes, David, you're right. We have to be reflective, but don't for a minute lose track of the fact that this is a directly coming from God, and must hence be for our benefit. I remember a dear friend of mine who was not well, was hospitalized with a very serious thing. And as soon as I heard about it, that night I held a fabrengen, a gathering, a joyous occasion to celebrate his recovery. He wasn't anywhere near on the road to recovery yet. But we're already celebrating his recovery. And we can taste it. And that joy and that happiness and that trust in God, that absolute confidence that he certainly will have a complete recovery, helps to bring about the refuah, the healing. And that's the Chassidic approach to joy, to always be joyful, because come what may, we have to, you don't go dancing at a funeral, right? It's not appropriate. There's a time to be, as King Solomon says in Koheles, there's a time for everything. There's a time to mourn and a time for rejoicing. But even in the midst of our mourning, we say, Baruch Dayan HaEmetz, blessed is the true judge. Because we understand that somehow this is the right thing. And we can have two separate emotions at the same time. How do we have two separate emotions at the same time? Because they're coming from different sources. They're different reasons. Pain and sorrow for the loss, but joy in the knowledge that somehow this is coming from God and must be good. We can harbor both. It always reminds me when I say whenever I say we can harbor both emotions at the same time, I always think about when I was a little kid and we were living in Holland. And I was about 8 years old. And I decided it was time to go to the beach, Scheveningen. I had some great games at the beach, and it was a lot of fun on the pier. So I talked to my sister, and I talked to her into going on the bus, and we took the bus, and we went off to the beach.
Want to get it?
Somehow, we neglected to mention anything to my parents. So an hour later, my parents are freaking out because they're in a foreign country, a foreign language, and their kids are gone. No trace. And when we only had a dime left, I called from the beach and said, hey, we run out of money. Can you pick us up? Now, the two emotions my mother had simultaneously was, thank God he's safe. I'm going to beat the hell out of him.
We've all been there.
Yeah. Mm.
So you can harbor two emotions simultaneously, and they can be opposing emotions, but they're coming from different sources. They're coming from different reasoning, and so that's why we can hold them both. Go for it.
I'll mention, if I could, one other area. I didn't participate in all the classes, but I did read the old material. And another part of the material that I thought was especially meaningful, interesting, whatever, was about controlling your mind and where your attention goes. And then, of course, relating that to the overall theme of joy. But that I thought was a nice combination of thinking about what that means. I go into that a lot, but you asked for feedback. That was an area that I thought was really meaningful.
Very powerful. And Dr. Edith Eger talks about that in a different context. It's the same idea, but Edith Eger was a Holocaust survivor, and she talked about between stimulus and response, you have a choice. You can't control what happens to us, what they do to us, but you can control how you respond, how you look at it, how you perceive it. You can become despondent, or you can become stronger. And that's where we talked about, you can either be depressed, or you can be bitter and move into action. Depression creates lethargy, bitterness creates energy. And it's your choice how you respond with it. So absolutely, we have the choice. We can think about things. We can choose to think about what we want to think about. Yeah, very powerful. Any other roundup thoughts?
One thing that I do more than ever, and it's reflected in what our lessons have said, that I try to remember to thank Hashem for everything. So not just something great happens or something, that seems out of the ordinary. It's the everyday stuff, just to thank Hashem for being there.
Yeah, an attitude of gratitude.
Yeah.
I remember in Chicago that our house opened to the east. And oftentimes, coming out of the house in the morning to go down the street to the Minyan, the sun would just be cresting over the houses in front, and it would catch my breath. I would just have to stop and breathe deep and look up and truly appreciate a beautiful sky and a beautiful sun. Taking the time to have that attitude of gratitude, to actually thank God for the little things and for the big things, but to actually, be appreciative that changes our whole day, having those little gratitudes. And so as we wrap up the class, I want to express my gratitude for all of you that have been here for this long series. We started off as it was like a 10-week class, and I think it's gone well beyond that. As we've
A lot of
together.
breaks.
So I want to
And
thank
some
everyone
interesting interludes.
Thank you.
for being a part of it and staying the course.